Welcome to Eviliv3, live media streaming. The live media commentary show. Of course, it's streaming because I'm talking and you're watching. That answers the question: what is Lucifer's role in the second war in heaven? I know the answer. Do you? Well, subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we're reviewing The Prophecy. That's right, the original, the great, the long time made, and got horrendous critical reviews when it was released and has since become a cult hit. Well, in September 1st, 1995, when it came out, I didn't actually see it. I only saw it when it came out on VHS. And from that moment on, I became obsessed with this film. Not only is it a solid, I don't know if you'd call it like a sort of an action horror film, but those are the sort of sensibilities. But as far as inspiration for different type of games that you might want to play or stories that you want to tell, I think the idea of having a second war in heaven and having it be outside of the confines of the dichotomy of God and Satan, I think it's very, very interesting. So again, this was released September 1st, 1995. It was written and directed by Gregory Wyden, and it was also his feature directorial debut. So this is like his first piece that he wholly created himself, much like later on today I'm going to be reviewing Clive Barker's Hellraiser, very much in the similar vein of that. The film score was by David C. Williams, and it was released by Perseverance Records October 7th, 2006, so a very long time since. The log line is this, before we get into it. At the scene of bizarre murder, LA homicide detective Thomas Dagget discovers a lethal heavenly prophecy now being fulfilled on Earth. In his fight to stop the forces of evil, he finds an unlikely ally in an elementary school teacher. So this is actually Virginia Madsen's second horror film. She had already done Clive Barker's Candyman, and then she came back, I believe, to do this one. Yeah, she did Candyman in 1992, and so this was her second horror debut, and she's brilliant as the teacher. Now, I'm not gonna put on airs and say this is like the most amazing film ever, because what I feel about it is certainly not what everyone else feels about it. And just by way of sort of comparing and contrasting, it has 6.4 out of 10 on IMDb. It's 46% rotten on Rotten Tomatoes as far as the critics are concerned, but the audience has it at 64%. So that lines up really well with what IMDb has. And the truth is, in my personal opinion, that this is a solid story, solid acting, and it's presented in an era where there was a lot of religious horror films just being released in like a huge run. This was a very, very popular time. And I think arguably it lasted all the way through, maybe even to 2000. But from 95 to 2000, we were really flooded with a lot of really terrible religious films. And then there's a couple gems in there as well. And I'm extending religion into like the craft. So it's like, paganism and stuff like that, witchcraft. It was just this huge run, especially like of Christian horror. I mean, not long after this, a couple of years, was Stigmata, which is another one I'm going to review on this channel because it was just brilliant. I absolutely love that film. But, it's just that sort of the vein of relying on Catholicism to inform a narrative about, the sort of the trappings of heaven and hell and how that affects us mortals was overplayed. And arguably this is near the end of it, but the acting in this is what really sets it apart. And maybe not even so much the acting as much as the actors. Christopher Walken. You can't really get better than Christopher Walken. He's amazing. And I have this crazy delay now. Wow, that's wild. I have no idea why I have that big of a delay. I'm going to try to resolve it as I'm talking here. But anyway, this Christopher Walken plays the Archangel Gabriel. Elias Koteas is Thomas Dagget. Virginia Madsen is Catherine. Eric Stoltz is brilliant. He is Simon, an archangel. Viggo Mortensen, one of my favorite actors of the world, is Lucifer, one of the greatest portrayals of the devil full stop. I mean, he is brilliant as the devil in this. And I mean, some of the dialogue, the lines that he has are on par with some of the best horror film lines ever. Keep the light on, Thomas, at the very, very end, after Thomas has professed himself for being terrified of the dark. Even when he was a little kid, he was afraid Lucifer was under there, and Lucifer was telling him that I was under the bed waiting for you. It's just so great. Oh, I love it so much. Okay, so it really starts out where Thomas Dagget is like going to be ordained as a priest, but then he doesn't hear God's word in his mind, and so he doesn't go through with it. Then he becomes a police detective years later, and he just sort of is living his life up until the point where it's it's sort of the if there's like an A and B story that's like intermixed, right? I mean, A and B stories are always intermixed, but in this particular case, there's the second war in heaven, and then there's how that affects the mortals and the mortals' attempts at stopping it in some way or prolonging its conclusion. So the setup is this. After the first war in heaven, which was a third of the host of heaven was cast out by God and Gabriel and Michael, and they were thrown down to earth, they became demons and devils, right? So that's where you get your Lucifer and your Satan and stuff like that. So that was the first war. The second war is now that man has sort of evolved, God is showing humans more favor than he's showing his own angels. And so a lot of the angels in heaven, namely Christopher Walken's Gabriel, are jealous of humans. And so they want to have God's love before mortals. So that's the whole purpose of the second war. And so Gabriel's coming down to collect one of the most vile human souls in order to use that soul in the war against those angels who are okay with God seeing angels as second tier and humans as first tier. Gabriel wants it, of course, opposite. He wants to be number one. So he goes down to find this Colonel Hawthorne's soul, and that's really what starts all of this off. So Uziel, which is an archangel, came down to find the soul on behalf of Gabriel, and the soul was already discovered by the angel Simon, who's on the other side. You know, he wants to keep order and have, you know, God make choices for himself and not have angels try to usurp his authority. And so he wants to go down there to stop Uziel and Gabriel's side from getting this soul. He located it. Uziel comes down. They fight. Simon ends up killing Uziel, and that's where Thomas Dagget, the police officer, comes in, because you know he's called in to see this dead body. They find out that this creature doesn't have any ocular cavities. Its bones show no growth marks like all human bones do. So, and it's a hermaphrodite. So it's like it was created full stop, right? And this is what we learn about angels in this universe, is that they assume mortal forms when they come down, but that is not their real form. And their heart is how you kill them. You like have to, like, you know, sort of Temple of Doom style, rip your hand in and then rip the heart out. And that will immediately kill an angel, sending their souls to wherever, you know, I don't even know if it's a soul or whatever, but their essence, their angelic essence somewhere else. In this setup, Thomas Dagget is sort of trying to figure out what the hell this Uziel body is, and the coroner gives him some of his possessions, and one of which is a book, and it shows this 23rd chapter of Revelation, which of course doesn't exist. But as far as the book is concerned, the chapter translates as, "There were angels who could not accept the lifting of man above them, and like Lucifer, rebelled against the armies of the loyal Archangel Michael, and there rose a second war in heaven." So that's where Thomas Dagget learns the whole premise of the war, and we as an audience understand, oh, that's what's happening. That's why angels are killing each other. I love the way they portray the angels coming down, because everything is like, you show the shadow of the angel, and then it forms into a man in a trench coat. And the trench coat is sort of the stand-in for wings. But then when the angels are like waiting, because of course they're angelic, they're patient as hell with everything they do, they're always perched in a silhouette of a bird, which is very, very beautiful to look at. And it sort of plays with all those ideas of angelic messages being heralded by doves or, stuff like that. What's really, really solid about this series is that in this film in particular is it introduces the concept that angels are not loving creatures. And they never have been. In the Bible, they're portrayed as terrible and monstrous. They turn cities into salt. They murder people. They are the agents of God. And so, in the Old Testament specifically, they are agents of vengeance. It's a vengeful God. They want to make man pay and suffer for their sins. And so it's the angels that have to do that. And so Gabriel does this really great line, Christopher Walken, where he's talking, I believe he's talking to Catherine, played by Virginia Madsen, but I think he is talking to Catherine. Anyway, he's telling her that, we tear babies out of women's bodies. We destroy people. And sometimes I even enjoy it. I'm sort of paraphrasing here. But it's the idea that we mortals are not supposed to understand the mind of God or the actions of angels. That's not our role. And the fact that we're so inquisitive as a people, as a species, it actually infuriates the angels a little bit because they feel like they're so much above us. They, throughout the entire film, Christopher Walken's character Gabriel is calling us monkeys because we evolved from monkeys. And so he's so confused and angry that monkeys are being held on a pedestal higher than angels in God's eyes, which is the whole point of this whole war. So anyway, Simon goes into hiding because obviously he doesn't want Gabriel to find him, and he knows that because Uziel was sent after him, that he's going to find him, and he ends up going to this sort of reservation school that's sort of shut down partially, right? And sort of this mining town that has sort of gone the way of economic ruin. So he goes into this school, and that's where we sort of meet the rest of the cast. So we already met Thomas Dagget because he was investigating Uziel's death. This is where we meet Catherine, played by Virginia Madsen as the school teacher, and Mary, the young girl, played by Mariah Shining Dove Snyder. And she is great in this. As a child actor, as far as child actors go, it's sort of like a hit and miss. They're either good or they're passable. I think Mary is actually, the character of Mary, is actually a really good actress playing her. And the role, I think, is done really well because there's some inherently uncomfortable scenes that have to be played out. So Eric Stoltz, whom I love as an actor, plays Simon. He has Colonel Hawthorne's soul inside of him, and he's slowly dying because Uziel almost killed him in that first confrontation at the beginning of the film. Now he knows his mortal form is dying, so he needs to get this soul out and hidden from Gabriel. And so he convinces Mary, the little girl, to let him tell her a secret, and there's this wildly uncomfortable scene where it's almost like he's like making out with her, but he just holds this little child's mouth, and he's like exhaling the evil soul into Mary in order to shield that soul from Gabriel's knowledge, hide it. Again, very, very uncomfortable, but it works in the film and everything. Catherine, the teacher, comes up looking for Mary, sees Simon there, tells him, look, you can't be here. She just thinks he's some homeless guy because they've had to deal with that before in the past. Tells him he needs to leave. And the whole time, every time an angel's talking, they're talking in either parables or they're making conversation as if humans had some conscious idea about the complexity of the divine that these angels have to exist in. So there's always these ideas of you have no idea how much it hurts me to be here, or you'll never understand why I do what I do. It's just this idea that we are not capable of comprehending some of these ideas. And so, but angels can't help but communicate those ideas it's as if we were talking to a bug. This evolved human species talking to a less evolved human species, or I'm sorry, a less evolved species. You just can't really communicate to them on their level. So they're really sort of like falling back on this idea of you just don't get it. You'll never understand because you can't possibly understand. It's kind of, I don't know. I kind of like how they portray it in this. And so then, Thomas comes out to investigate because Gabriel ends up finding Simon, murdering him, and then of course the police are called in, and that's where Thomas comes in, and he learns that Colonel Hawthorne's soul is being sought after by these angels, and he needs to help find, where this soul is to stop Gabriel from murdering all these people. And he teams up with Catherine because she's worried about Mary, and Mary had a connection with Simon, and that's where Thomas is connected with them. And so Catherine and Thomas are working to help protect Mary. And ultimately, Gabriel finds out that Mary is holding the soul. Mary is taking over to a tribal medicine man, and they're supposed to extract the evil demon soul, I'm sorry, the evil human soul, and destroy it in God's light. I don't know, in like some mystical ending scene, which is great. But then we add in like this sort of second little twist at the end. So Thomas and Catherine are protecting Mary while she's having this ritual go on, and Lucifer shows up. And again, this scene with Lucifer is brilliant. He's sitting there talking, ripping apart a rose, and then eats the bud. His visual appearance is beautiful. He's seductive. He's scary. He's monstrous, and he has this little sort of demonic companion with him that's sort of Cenobite-like. I mean, very, very cool stuff. But he's telling her, look, I'm going to help you defeat Gabriel, because what Gabriel is doing is what I tried to do. And if Gabriel succeeds in heaven, what I was unable to succeed in heaven, that means there's going to be two hells, and that's one hell too many. That's my gig. I'm Lucifer. I'm the fallen angel, not Gabriel, so I need to help you defeat him. And so he tells Catherine some sort of philosophical ideas on how to defeat Gabriel. And then Thomas comes out, and he has this really great interaction with Thomas, telling him that, it's really jealousy that's driving Gabriel, and to use that idea against Gabriel. And so when Gabriel finally does get there, and they sort of have their little showdown, it's Lucifer who ends up going in after Thomas has beaten the shit out of Gabriel, the angel, with this sort of tire iron, like really kicked the shit out of him. Lucifer comes in, rips Gabriel's heart out, and eats it. And he has blood all over him. And then he drops the heart, and he looks over, and Thomas and Catherine are like, it's over, because we saw the spirit go out of Mary and get destroyed by God's light. And Lucifer's like, no, it's not over. I want you two to come home with me. I love you. I love you more than Jesus. And that line is so brilliantly portrayed in this scene. Lucifer has blood all over his face and his hands from just ripping out Gabriel's heart and eating it. And he's just sitting there convincing Thomas that you need to come with me. You belong with me. You're like me. It's just so brilliant. And of course, Thomas refuses and stuff. I mean, that's, he's supposed to be this good priest guy. And in the second film, he actually ends up being a monk, like, because of the insanity of everything he experienced in this first film. But, like, that's really how it ends. And there's some other really great moments in this movie where Gabriel is incapable of driving or really manipulating modern technology. He's an angel, so he doesn't really understand it. He sees it all as beneath him. And so he finds people who are just almost dead, like they're terminal, and their soul is about to leave their body. Then he calls their soul back to their body. And so they're basically like zombies, and they just do his bidding, but their soul is in their body. And so they understand that they should be dead, but they're not. And it's Gabriel keeping them alive, torturing them as their body continues to degrade. The first one was played by Adam Goldberg, and it was brilliant. He does such a good job as this. First of all, he's just a great actor. But in this role as Jerry, this sort of zombie character working on behalf of Gabriel, he's sarcastic, he's witty, he's pretty funny, but it all works in the confines of he's pissed that Gabriel won't let him die. He tried to kill himself, and it's just misery for him. But he has to go through with all these stupid motions of driving him around and digging holes for him and stuff. Really, really great. And then there's another one where, give me 1 second while I search my notes for it. Amanda Plummer. So she is the second corpse after Thomas kills Jerry. But I'm looking. Amanda Plummer is Rachel in this. She is just wonderful. I've loved her since So I Married an Axe Murderer. Just everything that she's in, I think she's just a brilliant. Pulp Fiction, of course, she's brilliant at what she does, but she brings this sense of pain as Gabriel's calling her back to life right after her soul slipped away. And just the pain in her expressions and acting is just so believable. It sort of tears me up a little bit when I watch it. Absolutely adore it. But and a quick note about this as well. Christopher Walken, Amanda Plummer, and Eric Stoltz were all in Pulp Fiction, which was filmed before this was released. And actually, this film was filmed 2 years before it was released originally, The Prophecy, and it was right before that they all were together filming Pulp Fiction with. All right, for the life of me, I can't remember his damn name. But they never actually shared any like scenes together. And so they were all really great in Pulp Fiction, but then they come over and do The Prophecy where they're actually sharing scenes together, and it just adds this, sort of extra level of fun for those of us who really like actors and the roles that they choose and the different films that they play in. Christopher Walken is just one of those actors that if you like Christopher Walken, you will look for any other films he's in so you can just watch him in them. And that's, he's just one of those people. I love doing that. Eric Stoltz is another one. I absolutely adore him as an actor. So, interesting notes. Viggo Mortensen claims that prior to shooting their scene together with Lucifer and Gabriel, Christopher Walken had eaten several whole garlic cloves. So that's pretty gross and messed up. In the Madonna video for the song Bad Girl from her album Erotica, Christopher Walken plays the angel of death who silently follows Madonna, and as she's being destroyed by her lifestyle. And there's no speaking part, but his mannerisms and look are strikingly similar to the later depiction of Gabriel in The Prophecy. Let's see. Searching through Uziel's belongings, that's where we found that chapter 23 of the Holy Bible, which doesn't exist. After the prologue at the very, very beginning of the film, Thomas Dagget can be seen smoking on the rooftop of a building, and he has this voiceover saying that there's this strange verse in the Holy Bible that always stuck out to him. And the verse is, "Even now in heaven there were angels carrying savage weapons." That verse doesn't actually exist in the Bible, but it's a great way of setting up this biblical connection to this angelic story. And I think this entire film it's one of those that will always stay with you. If you like the Abrahamic myths, or if you're just a religious person, you will definitely remember this film after watching it. And I don't know why people didn't like it very much when it first came out, because the acting is all great. The story I thought was brilliant. I love how Lucifer frames it. If you succeed, Gabriel, then you've created a hell in heaven, and that's one hell too many. Paraphrasing, of course. That is a great concept. If you go against God's will and usurp his will, then you've created a hell. Oh, and there's a great line by Lucifer in this too, where he says, "You know what hell is really like? It's not all fire and brimstone. It's just the absence of God. That's it. It's the absence of God. It's not darkness. It's not pain. It's not suffering. It's just the absence of God." And that is a new depiction of hell that, especially in a Catholicism-backed storyline, is completely different than every other version of Catholicism's version of hell. It's always fire and brimstone and torture and pain and suffering, right? But no, in this, it's none of that. It's just the absence of God. And that in and of itself is supposed to be so painful that that's why you're suffering. Because you're not near. The concept I really appreciate. I'm not a religious person, so I don't buy any of this bullshit. But I love the storytelling side of it. I think it's really, really great. And especially as this series progresses, it gets into the Nephilim, which is one of my little secret obsessions. It gets into some really great mythology later on, even though after this film, which was a theatrical debut, every other film was a straight to direct to video release. And it's because the production values, they didn't have a lot of production values in these stories. And so, the quality of the actors declined as well because of the production value issues. Christopher Walken only showed up in 2 more of these films, and then he stopped doing them entirely. And the story gets interesting. So I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to do, film by film reviews for all of these. So I hope you stay tuned in with me, because It gets weird. It gets kind of cool. The imagery sometimes is overused from this first film, but then there's also new imagery that's added that is just visually brilliant, even though it's very small and sort of in between greater scopes of like terrible filming. As far as the series goes, it's still a lot of sort of cheesy fun. So my favorite part of this entire film has to be Lucifer with Viggo Mortensen. I mean, close second with Gabriel and Simon, but Lucifer in this film is the best Lucifer for me as a viewer. I absolutely adored Viggo Mortensen as him. My least favorite part of this film has to be the idea of the soul. Like, they had to have a reason to get Gabriel on Earth to sort of struggle with these humans, right? And so it was over Colonel Hawthorne's soul. But what was he supposed to use the soul for? They just say he was going to be used in the war that Gabriel was raging in heaven. But that's it. And this idea that Gabriel says, since the war is going on, no soul is able to go to its final resting place. So no soul has been able to go into heaven while the angels are fighting since the dawn of time. That idea is completely just glossed over, and which is a great, solid, kind of crazy idea, but it's glossed over and it's forgotten in later films. I just wish they would have maintained the integrity of that idea moving forward to help explain, like, how could those souls go out of their body for Gabriel to call them back if there's nowhere for those souls to go? It's a loose thread of the logic of the film that has always bothered me a little bit, but it's not enough to actually make me dislike the film at all. And because of that, this may not be a surprise to any of you watching this, but certainly to anyone who's seen this film without listening to this, I'm giving this 5 out of 5 evil eyes. Christopher Walken's amazing. Viggo Mortensen's amazing. Eric Stoltz is amazing. The story is a lot of fun. You get to deal with the angels as demons. And as the series goes on, we get to see Glenn Danzig, which is a lot of fun. We get to see a return of Christopher Walken in a couple films. I mean, the story kind of goes off the rails in really fun, exciting directions. This is a great show, and I highly recommend everyone check it out. But that is going to do it for this review of The Prophecy. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you had a fun time, and I hope you give this a chance if you haven't seen it yourself. But as always, remember that evil spelled backwards is live. So get out there and, like Gabriel, be evil.